Carried. Declarations of interest. There are no declarations of interest. Public forum. There's no public forum today. Council minutes for the 1st of June 2017 on page 6. Moved by Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor James. Any comment? All those for? Any against? Carried. Elected member briefing notes, page 20. We have a mover. Councillor Leo, seconded. Councillor Siggy. Any comment? All those for? Any against? Carried. Adoption of the 2017-18 annual plan for decision, page 24. Welcome, Sean.
And David Bryant.
And David.
Thank you, Andrew. Mayor Andrew. So this is the formal adoption of the annual plan. The budget in it is what you had previously approved. So with that, we'll take it as read. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, Councillor Mark.
Mayor Andrew, just regards the, I'm on the wrong item. I'm on, beg your pardon, I'm on the next item, sorry. I'm on the budgets.
Okay, do we have a mover? Councillor James, seconded. Councillor Mark, any debate? Councillor Robb.
We're in debate, aren't we?
We're in debate now.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes, I wish to speak to the adoption of the annual plan. I support the annual plan, albeit with some reluctance. This council has achieved much financially over the past 3 years, with small surpluses in each year after 9 years of operating deficits. This annual plan is a turnaround, heading council back to potential deficits unless there is extreme care in managing expenditure and or some tough income decisions from councillors. There has been a willingness and eagerness over the past 9 months of this council to spend. Some of the expenditure has been unplanned, but is necessary to maintain the operation of city assets. Other spending has been unexpected, and we all know about the Victoria on the River site, the land subsidence around the water treatment plant, the library seismic strengthening that's required, and so forth. So planning for a surplus provides a contingency against these. And I think it's important going forward that we should have in mind the need for at least a budgeted surplus. Other expenditure has been around delivering election promises, and the main ones here including the free parking in the CBD, which has an annual cost of about $1 million, and the REAP task force, which is a deep dive into a district plan even before it becomes fully operative. And the cost of the REAP task force is around $700,000. Interestingly, this remains unmentioned in the balancing of the books commentary on page 34. Lurking in the background are the following: further funding for the indoor courts at Rototuna, which might cost the council around $2 to $3 million. The implementation of the living wage, which was previously estimated by staff to cost around $8 million a year. And thirdly, the ever-increasing depreciation charges arising from growth and revaluations. And while I accept that understanding depreciation is complex, it's very, very important. You know, it's a cop-out to me to budget for depreciation, to recover it in rates, and then decide not to fund. And we really need to look seriously at that depreciation cost and how we go about arriving at the budgeted figure that we should then set in terms of our recovery from rates. I think depreciation is similar to Councillor Mallett's concerns over a number of years about the CapEx budget. We go out to the market, we tell ratepayers what we're going to do, and we don't necessarily deliver on that. So I think we need to have close looks at what is happening in the background. All of these costs that I've mentioned are revenue costs needing to be funded from annual income. Borrowing for new assets and growth is over and above this, but it does have a flow-on effect in interest charges, maintenance and depreciation. There is now more than ever a need for this council to be extremely careful around our current spending decisions and our future spending to ensure that we have in our budgets adequate income streams to fund these. In March of this year, Council voted strongly against increasing rates beyond 3.8%, yet the spending continues. So my parting comment in this debate is around the need to have courage to either say no to the spending or yes to an appropriate increase in income to match that expenditure. Thank you.
You happy?
Are you asking me?
Have you got any comment? Yeah, I'm just asking the Chief Executive, have you got any comments?
Just the only.
Sorry,
I'm fine.
I have to say, I don't think that's appropriate in the middle
Okay.
of speaking.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Dave?
Besides, there are other people that can make the comments. I'd have to say, hearing Councillor Pascoe's speech in favour of the motion, that with friends like that, who needs enemies? He proceeded to criticise substantial parts of or directions of the annual plan, some of which were quite inaccurate. I'll run through some of those inaccuracies at the moment. There's some points I agree with him on as well. But firstly, the land subsidence is not at the water treatment plant, it's actually across the river where water pipes come out of the river. It's nothing to do with the water treatment plant, and that would be concerning if it was, but that's not the case. There is no extra expenditure in this annual plan for the indoor courts. We voted against that.
Point of order. If Councillor McPherson wants to go back, I was clear in my indications that I said lurking in the background are the following. And I then mentioned about the indoor courts, the living wage and the depreciation charges. So I was very clear in my speech that that these were not approved expenditure, but they're expenditure that's sitting in behind and have been discussed in this and past councils.
So Councillor Pascoe's quite right that he said lurking in the background, entirely inappropriately, I might add. I'm glad he's repeated that, because that was put to bed, that there was a suggestion there may be some extra money. My own organisation outside this council was one that might have benefited from any extra money being spent. I voted and argued against that, because even though personally I thought it was a good idea, as a councillor I thought it was not a good idea to put extra money over and above the allocation. That it's not lurking in the background. That's why it's quite inaccurate, because it's not going to happen. That facility has been finished. We saw photographs of it 2 days ago, and it's finished state. No more money is needed to complete it. No more money is going to be asked of council. It's entirely inappropriate to suggest that it's lurking in the background, because there is no background for that. It's finished, done, dusted. No more going to be asked of council, and we've already voted for no more to be given, so I'm drawing a line through that. Living wage, there is no proposal in this annual plan for a living wage. And this is the debate about the annual plan, not about anything else in future. And as someone that brought that up before, I actually resent that sort of suggestion that putting up a straw person to be then shot down when there is no such straw person in the room. The Chief Executive reminded me about this just yesterday, deliberately refrained from proposing the living wage be paid to council employees, despite thinking it was a good idea in the moral sense, realising there was no money for that in the annual plan. I didn't continue to propose that through this annual plan, and I think it's quite wrong to put up that sort of straw argument as well. I think it actually demeans Councillor Pascoe's good arguments, one of which was about depreciation. I do agree with his comments about that. I don't think we're handling depreciation fully correctly, and I think we are charging ratepayers for future expenditure that we may not actually use that money for, and I think we have to address that in the LTP round. So, and certainly in that area I would agree with him. But I think the biggest problem with this annual plan and annual plans at LTP for the last 3 to 6 years is that we've been living in a fool's paradise as far as provision of necessary infrastructure to cope with growth. And I think that we're going to really be up against it in 1 year's time when we're voting for the LTP, when we're looking at the costs of providing infrastructure to meet the needs of growth. I think we've deliberately, knowing growth is coming, knowing growth was actually happening, we've put blinkers on as far as the actual statistics of that growth in the last 3 to 4 years, and we've not funded the necessary infrastructure. We've got a bow wave facing us in the future, and which we wouldn't address in this annual plan. We voted not to address that at all, to save that addressing, if you like, until the LTP in a year's time. We should be addressing that now, in my opinion. We should be starting to, because it's going to be that much worse in 12 months' time. It's not a bad thing in one sense if you prepare for it. Growth can be a good thing if you plan for it, but growth can be a very bad thing for the finances of the city if you don't prepare for it. And that's the problem with the council for the last 6 years, and the last 3 especially, is we have not prepared for the growth that we're seeing all around us. We don't need Statistics New Zealand outdated figures to tell us that. We don't even need the university's more correct figures to tell us that. We've got growth happening all around the city. We're going to continue to have growth happening, and we haven't got the infrastructure in place to cope with it, and we're going to have to spend a hell of a lot of money to do that. And that is the problem with, in part, this annual plan. We didn't start this year. We've saved it up to next year, which means the bow wave is a little bit higher. Thanks.
Councillor Paula.
Speaking in support of the annual plan, despite, like most people around the table, probably feeling uncomfortable with some various aspects of it. But the annual plan, of course, is a report against annual business program and how we're tracking financially. It's not the big, meaty, strategic conversation that we expect to have in the LTP. I was getting a little bit uncomfortable at times about some of the new work programs and activities that have been put ahead of the LTP. Rob commented on a number of those, so I won't repeat that. I do agree that depreciation and renewal is vital. I guess I'm just want to raise a flag. I was fine to leave it be in this annual plan, but we need to take a close look at how we bring some of our very tired, very old, or closed even, facilities up to scratch, or at least fit for purpose, and I don't believe we're there at the moment. I'm sad to say that out loud. But I'm also going to champion very strongly in the next round of decisions that we take care of what we've got properly. So while the need to deal with growth seems like a large juggernaut heading our way, and I accept that, the need to care properly about our existing facilities and services is actually the elephant in the room. So the other issues, we've had a little bit of chat with the annual plan, smokes and mirrors about financial reporting, in my view, so long as we are transparent with the public and there is no fundamental inaccuracy or hiding of monies spent. We need to get past that. We've got a very big year coming up. We can't afford to do everything that is for real, but everything should come, excuse my head with my cold, should come before the public for consideration. That's why I was happy to approve everything that came through, like the zoo plan, because those things have got to stack up against everything else. And that's all about what I've said perpetually, creating a city that's strong and vibrant and a place that's livable, not just a great deal bigger. So So we've got actually a huge challenge coming to us, but that's probably an LTP discussion, so I will leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, I will be supporting the motion in terms of adopting the annual plan, and also note that the Mayor himself, I think, has correctly warned Council during this process that we have some really tough decisions ahead, which we know, which is a good product, not a good product, but you know, I'd rather be in a high growth area than a low growth area, but obviously with that comes huge challenges. And the Mayor, of course, showed great political courage in the sense of saying straight up that this annual plan is, in my view, it's a fix for now, but it puts off the day when we're going to have to make some really hard decisions in terms of the long-term plan, particularly around the issue of revenue raising, and obviously we must be looking at trimming costs. Just want to pick up some previous comments. Reference respectfully to free parking, that's totally consistent with the previous council called the Central City Transformation, revitalising the CBD. To me, that is a tool, hopefully, that we will help to revitalise our CBD and be very consistent with the Central City Transformation, which of course was strongly supported by the previous council and mayor. Reference has been made to indoor courts. I'm not going to get into that debate, but the Rotorua, the good news about Rotorua is the fantastic example of partnerships. And as I will keep banging on, and I'm sorry if I'm going to sound like a crack record, what we're going to find increasingly through our LTP process is that we are challenged in that we as a city are providing a whole range of facilities for a wider population base that doesn't pay the rates bills. And that is a crunch decision that we're going to have to continue to have with our neighbours. Number one, obviously, our boundaries, in my view, in terms of community of interest, are totally illogical, and do not reflect people who have a 100% community of interest with Hamilton and have a 100% connection and continue to use our facilities. And I'm going to keep talking about the Tamahiris of this world, whereby, and I respect at the moment, their rates basically go to fund some crucial infrastructure in the Waikato district, particularly the Pocono, Tuakau, North Waikato, but their rates do not help us fund all the facilities that they use every day. And I think that's going to be a crunch discussion that we need to continue to have through our long-term plan, because our ability as a city, in terms of our rating base, to provide those facilities for a wider catchment, of course, in my view, are severely compromised. Having said that, we've got the example of the Performing Arts Centre, the Founders Theatre replacement, which we'll obviously be picking up in terms of that decision, and the wonderful example of philanthropic private partnership, and also the potential for facilities such as the new Performing Arts Centre to become a truly regional facility in terms of funding, and obviously with that in terms of governance. Councillor McPherson is quite correct that a number of us who would like to see a living wage has not been possible to pursue that at this time. I like to call the living wage a fair go for fellow hard-working Kiwis, doing the right thing by your hard-working people who work for this council and making sure that they are paid a decent wage. Having said that, let me acknowledge the Chief Executive and the work you are doing, trying to do your best in terms of in that area. Finally, Mr. Chair, I will say that we are not alone, obviously, in the challenges we face, and we are exactly like Auckland and Tauranga area in terms of facing the huge pressures of growth, and how do we grapple with that, and I guess how do we achieve the balance between being sensible, but sensible in such a way that we want a city that is vital, productive, a place where people want to live, work and play. So so obviously I'll be supporting this annual plan in the full knowledge that this is the really easy bit. This is the really easy bit. The tough bit starts tomorrow in terms of the LTP.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I remember at an election meeting, it was a Sustainability Waikato meeting, and I got up and made my first political mistake. I got up and Dave and Martin were speaking ill of the previous council that they'd represented, and I said, hey, that's not on. You've made a decision, move on, support the team. My grave political mistake was actually making that before Martin had the right of reply. And he proceeded to rightfully beat me up in front of everybody, and but in the most gracious way. And afterwards he came and shook hands and we had a cup of tea. And that showed me that this is a really exciting and tough group, but a great group to work with. So as a first term councillor, this is a really exciting moment for us. It's our first annual plan. I know most of us would hope it would be the first of many. It may just be the first of 3. We'll see how it goes. But we all feel uncomfortable with parts of this. I understand that. I get that. We don't all get our own way all the way through, and that's what I really like. So I'd just like to take this little opportunity to thank some of our more senior councillors who have guided us through this teething stage on behalf of our baby steps, or of our baby steps as new councillors. First of all, Mayor Andrew, some instances spring to mind, setting the scene by lobbing in the grenade at our 27-hour meeting that day, and taking it on the chin, but you set the scene. The dialogue is now around, which I love. The dialogue is around. We haven't got much money. Let's not go crazy. Councillor McPherson, one instance springs to mind was when Councillor, many, but this is the one I will mention, when Councillor Jeff got through the river plan spend. Dave debated vehemently against it, spoke strongly against it, lost the motion and came over and shook hands with Jeff afterwards. And I thought, that's class. That's real class. Yeah, no. And I didn't count Jeff's fingers afterwards, but it looked honourable. Councillor Pascoe, you've impressed me with your wise knowledge, your kind counsel and your open mind, voting for the parking initiative to give it a crack after we made some amendments that you were pleased with. Showed me great grace and great thought, and I appreciate your counsel over the time. And similarly, Councillor Leo, who said, hang on a minute, I've changed my mind when it comes to the target 0 with the language with the annual plan. These kind of things are stuff that us new guys notice, and we look up to you guys, and we do very, very much appreciate it. I also want to send my best regards to Philip and thank him for his part in getting us to this stage. But I do want to fire a shot and say, look, the pace has changed. You've got a new group of councillors here who want to get stuff done. I think you've seen that when we lock arms and have a crack at this, we do get stuff done. It might be clumsy, and we may need a couple of clips around the ears by some of you longer in the tooth councillors, but we want to get stuff done. The foot has gone down, and we're a very positive group. But I just want to thank everybody for the grace and the strong debating and the wise counsel, and say, bring it on, let's vote for this annual plan.
Thank you, Councillor Mark. Just make a couple of comments. First of all, sure.
Sorry, I did have you in here, sorry. And I'd also like to thank the guy I started with, Deputy Mayor Martin Gallagher, for his very kind and generous support and advice that you wouldn't normally get from anybody else. And I do love your questions. I really do love your questions, so thank you. I appreciate it. No, you're a new councillor. You're young. Yeah. All right. Sorry, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Mark. Okay. Firstly, I'd just like to remind councillors that we are moving into debt. Firstly, I'd just like to remind councillors that we're moving into debt by $4 million a year at least. All right, so that means we're borrowing from the bank to keep the city running. by $4 million a year. All right? Secondly, I'd just like to also remind you that we're not balancing the books according to the government measure, which is the way that government has asked us to report by $7 million a year this year, $11 million next year. We chose not to address this in the annual plan when you first all got in, when this new council came into place, which means that there's a ghost in the cupboard. That when the door opens for the 10-year plan talks, which we're moving into now, it has to be addressed. We can't keep running the city the way we are. It's irresponsible, in my opinion. I'd also like to thank the staff who are involved in the preparation of this plan. I know you've put huge hours into it. I know you've worked late, and I know you've really made a big effort, guys, and your people who work for you, and the other people through this building, and we really do appreciate it. I know this, you've gone beyond the call of duty to get this done, to get these figures out, to get this brought together. So just really on behalf of this council, I want to thank you for all the hard work and the staff that are in behind you. We really do appreciate it, so thanks. All right, we'll go to the vote. All those for?
Can we do this one?
Okay, we'll do it on the board.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Yeah, don't use your hands, because I still have a deal with Dave. Every time you use your hand, I get a pay cut. So
Thank you,
I'll get rid of that. I've got to get rid of that agreement.
Chief Executive. Okay, now we move to page 70. Sorry, Councillor Cass, and I forgot to give you the right of reply there, but that opportunity's gone now. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone. Just firstly, if I can just put some context with regards to the report. So now that Council has adopted the 2017-18 annual plan.
Excuse me, could David, could you just introduce Matthew?
Apologies. Matthew Bell's our current Rates and Revenue Manager. Matthew's done a considerable amount of work behind the scenes in terms of putting the information together around the striking the rates for this year.
Thank you, Matthew.
In order for Council to set and assess rates for the financial year, you must also adopt a rates resolution as a requirement under the Local Government Rating Act. The rates resolution describes how rates are to be set and is based on the budget requirements from the annual plan and calculated using the rating systems and mechanisms previously adopted by Council. So just to be clear, this report, the body of the report is effectively the rates resolution, and that we're asking Council receive the report and adopts the rates resolution for the 2017-18 financial year.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, there are no questions. Sorry, Councillor Robb.
First question is on paragraph 15 as well as paragraph 22, where those tables are. Is it correct to say that as we are transitioning from land value to capital value, that the rate differential for commercial is reducing?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so I see it's at 2.97 in paragraph 22 and 1.83 for the general rate. How is it moving? Is it moving down significantly, or is it just sorry, do you know what it was at the time that we started the transition?
At the transition, it was approximately, the differential factor was 2.2 against the residential rate.
against the general rate?
against the general residential rate.
Yep,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
so that was 2.2, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So the indicator will be the differential factor based on the current general rate, which is set on the capital value as we transition towards capital value. So the capital value differential now sits at 1.83
Yep.
on the general rate.
Okay.
Yes, so
And
so
that
it
will
is-
continue to come down
That's-
as we move through that 10-year,
That's
that
correct.
10-year differential
Yes.
period, yep, okay. Question on paragraph 27, where the metered water rate is $9 million. On page 46 of the budget and the annual plan, it's sitting at $8.1 million. Can you just explain what the difference is there?
Yes, so the 8.1 million excludes GST. So the figures we see in this report include GST.
Oh, okay.
But there also is an element of water for commercial and rural property that don't have a water meter that are charged a minimum charge through the rates. So that's also incorporated within the nine.
Okay, but the 9 million, if you take 15% on the 8.1 million, it's not exactly 9 million.
It's not exactly 9 million
But-
because the other portion is in point. No, it's not 25. It's in point, sorry, over the page. So point 30 through 31.
Okay, sorry, we're at 31. Oh, there's another 266 there.
So yeah, so from 20,
Okay.
sorry, 28 onwards, yes.
Okay,
yes.
all right. So where does the water that we sell to the Waikato District Council, to Tamahiri and so forth, where does that figure in these figures here?
I believe it's a fee and charge. It's within our
It's a
fee
set
and
charge, is it?
Yes.
Rather than a metered charge?
Chris, the what do we charge to for trickle feed for Waikato District? Is that charged on a metered basis?
For the water revenue?
Yep.
Yes, it's metered.
But that's not a targeted rate, though, is it? No, it's just a contract. It's a contracted rate with Waikato District, isn't it? Yes.
Correct, yeah.
It's a basic user charge.
So it won't be in any of these figures here?
That's correct,
It'll
councillor.
come in as general income somewhere else in the budget?
Yes.
Yep, okay, thank you. And the garden rates, so paragraph, the Hamilton garden rate, the targeted rate for the gardens, is this the last year for the $11.50?
So yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, so next year that will disappear. And that's it, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Rob. Councillor Mark.
I've just got one question. That's regards the bid, the increase due to the new parking system. Is that for? I presume that's gone into the into here in item 22. Is that right?
It's actually item 40, so that's
40?
the central city rate.
Central City rate. Okay.
Yes.
Now, is that number? Does that reflect 9 months or 1 year?
That reflects 9 months.
Great. Thank you. Cool. That's all I had.
Councillor Dave. Do we have a mover?
And
Councillor
just
Siggy,
for
seconder.
absolute clarity, I'm just going to make this, because I'm a stickler for this stuff. What you are moving is effectively from page 70 right the way through to
Paragraphs 9
page 70,
9 to
75, effectively. Just putting that on record for the minutes from a legal compliance point of view. Thank you.
So it's paragraphs 9 to paragraph 64.
That's correct.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor... No, it's been moved by Siggy,
Cool.
seconded by Jeff. Speakers, Richard, sorry. Okay, there's no speakers, so we'll go straight to the vote. We'll reset. Has anyone not voted out there? There we go.
The Motion is carried unanimously.
So now we'll go to page 77. And we'll hand this one over to Becca.
Perhaps me, Chair.
Okay, to the Democracy Manager, Leanne. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Councillors will be aware that the annual general meeting of the Local Government New Zealand is being held next month. And as per usual process, a number of proposed remits have been sent to Council to make a determination on whether they wish to support them at the AGM. So those proposed remits are attached to this report, and we would be looking for an expression, well, we're looking for you to indicate by vote which ones you would like your representative, which is Mayor King, Mayor Andrew, to vote for at the AGM.
Yes, we will. Yep, agreed. Councillor Dave.
Are you dealing with them individually now, or?
Yeah, I think we'll deal with them individually, including questions
Yep.
individually, including debate individually.
I have a
Okay, so we're going to start with the Litter Act first, and Dave.
I've got a question about that one. I just want to check with someone, anyone who might know, because I don't.
Calvin, could you just come
Calvin.
straight to the bench, please? Just
Excellent.
on time.
Kelvin, does the litter proposal in the LGNZ report, does that mean that we, for instance, if we want to found someone's address in some paper in a rubbish bag dumped in one of our gullies, we could, fly tipping, we could actually charge the person or the household that done that, issue a fine? Is that what this is intended to deal with?
Yes. In fact, we already do that.
Okay.
It would just seem that we were doing it
Not so legally.
not so legally with that word just in there, without getting into a complex legal argument about what is present and what is immediate past. But there is a simple solution there.
Okay, thank you.
And the solution is the remit.
Yes, although when I look at the last, in the remit itself, the paragraph 5, it says the word just is removed, but then it goes on.
Hang on, we've only got 4 paragraphs. Sorry, got it. Yep.
Then it goes on to say, it says we'll just simply remove the word just from the section, and says that it would then read, and the actual wording still leaves the word just in there. So that's just a typo in my view.
Yes. Thank you. So we're on questions. Councillor Robb.
Yeah, I've just got a general question about all 4 of them, and that is, it's just a matter of procedure. When you go to the local government conference, are each of these items debated, or are they just presented and you vote on them?
I understand they will be spoken to.
So do you get a chance to speak on behalf of this council?
No, I don't.
On the remits?
No, can I?
Well, hang on, yes you do. In my experience you do. If any delegate gets the opportunity.
So when I've been to these twice, and Councillor Hall has been a number of times, basically the person that has moved the remits, in this case Palmerston North, and then the supporting group speak to it. And there's been one occasion when someone from the floor spoke to it as well, and they'd arranged previously that they wanted to comment with the organisers of the AGM. So yes, there's an option to speak in that respect.
Does that give the opportunity that if the group that's so assembled there, they could change the motion around?
That I haven't seen. No, I don't know on that one, Councillor Paula.
I'm just sort of looking at the procedure that, that if one of these remits needed some tinkering to make it more effective, does that happen at that conference?
No. I'll find out specifically through the governance manager, and we'll email out all councillors that affect Councillor Pascoe.
Okay.
Councillor Robb.
Okay, thank you.
Why they're pre-circulated early to allow that debate. The idea is that council's input now, and so if we've got any amendments, we should really send them we should tell them today, after this meeting, some form, and that allows any consideration. But there's never a large debate, never seen it happen, not once.
Councillor
Maybe
Dave.
there should be, but there isn't. Oh, I'm still up.
Councillor Dave, you finished?
No, I didn't.
Didn't get
I've
started?
asked
Okay.
my question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Question, Councillor Leo.
Kelvin, you can probably help us here. Paragraph 7, the first bullet point. I understood that the council had the authority to issue infringement notices for litter.
Correct.
And yet they're wanting to amend the Act to enable local authorities to do so. Well, that's what it says.
It would enable us to do it for the situation under section 15, which while the word just remains in there, we would not be able to do it in the event that it was, to use the example from Councillor Dave, that it was historic, so it wasn't present or immediate past. That we would, and if we find someone now in Councillor Dave's example, we currently, under this interpretation, would not be able to infringe them. But we can issue infringements for if we see something happening immediately.
So somebody out in Garden Place drops a cigarette packet or something, you can bang them for the infringement there and then?
Correct.
Yep. Let's go.
Thank you, Councillor Leo. Councillor Paula.
Thank you. I'm in support of this, but just in saying that, just wanted to
Hang
know...
on, well, question.
I know. I'm saying that. I want to know, what I want to know is, because we're very well having something, in reality, do we have the resources that we need to do it? Do we actually, to what extent do we already deal with this stuff through infringements? And does council have the resources, personnel or whatever to do it? I actually literally saw someone throwing a takeaway meal out of the car on Wairiri Drive on my way home the other day, literally right in front of me, but I couldn't do anything about it.
We do, and in fact, Chris Allen's team, through his compliance group, takes care of all the fly tipping and everything, and they do a significant number of infringement notices.
They do?
Yes.
So we could have an update through you, Chief Executive, some stage on those kind of things, just so we know what goes on the ground. That would be excellent. Thank you, Mayor Andrew.
Councillor Mark.
More of a general question. Regards the litter, Kelvin, can we set how much the infringement level is, or is that done nationally?
No, we set it, and it was in the last fees and charges. In fact, we took a slight reduction, and it's set. There are 4 or 5 different categories in which there are fees set for them.
Okay, so we can change those at that time?
Correct.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, and I certainly see in terms of our, where we're currently reviewing our...
Martin, we're on questions. Sorry.
Oh, okay, question. Do you anticipate when we roll out our, or further discuss our refuge and recycling new contract, to address the issue of clean and tidy streets and using all the legislative and bylaw tools available to us?
Perhaps I can answer that. It's definitely one of the work streams through our waste task forces to look at our bylaw and the compliance tools that we've got. It's definitely part of the program of works.
And do you anticipate that we can have a discussion at some stage with regard to the issue of hoarding on a property where there's huge amounts of rubbish, which basically means that the next door neighbours have their value of their property wiped out because they can't sell them because a person is hoarding a whole lot of rubbish and stuff on their particular property, albeit it's on private land, but it's a hoarding situation.
And if it's at the end of Anglesey Street?
Yes.
Yeah, I imagine yes is the answer, and the linkages to the bylaw and what we can do on private property. I think they're 2 different things, but I'm sure we can have the conversation and align it with our waste group work.
Thank you for your answer.
There's no conflict there, is there? You don't live down there, do you? No. Okay, we're going to debate. Councillor Martin. So we need a mover. Councillor Paula, seconded by Councillor Mark. And there's no one to debate, so we'll go to the vote.
Just to be clear, moving in support? Yes. Thank you. I want to make for the record.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, so we're going to the second item now. So this is the remit on page 82 and 83. This is for the Local Government New Zealand voting later on next month. So this is 15% goods and services tax. I'll take it as read. Questions?
Mr. Chair, I would ask to have, tell me when we can have debate on this, please.
Yes. Okay, so we're going straight to debate. We need a mover. Councillor Dave, seconded by...
It's moving in support, Councillor Dave.
I'm certainly not moving against.
Just that the resolution recommendation is support or not support, and it's been clear for the record.
Anyone, do we have a seconder? Councillor Leo. Okay, so we're in debate, and Councillor Rob. So hang on, well, sorry, who moved this? Councillor Dave.
Oh, no, that's okay. You moved it. Yeah, sorry.
Look, this is doesn't go as far as I would like to see. I believe that, and this is something this council's tried to achieve along with other councils in the past, that we should get a share of all GST in this area coming back to help with council finances for infrastructure especially. I think that would be an appropriate funding mechanism, but unfortunately it's not allowable under the Act at the moment, even though LG&Z in fact itself has taken that wider picture up in the past. But I think this is a subset of that. And I think it's a good move for areas that face large tourism influx. And that could be Hamilton, for instance, when the Lions are in town. We need to provide fan zones, and we subsidise buses taking people to the stadium. Maybe it's small for us compared with your Queenstowns and Rotoruas of the world, but I think it's it's a much better idea than having the ratepayers in the area have to fund infrastructure that's primarily or in large part needed by tourists coming in from, especially from overseas, and in the absence of the government being prepared to put an international levy coming in the absence of things like Phil Goff's bed tax, which may not get anywhere. I think this is an appropriate nationwide way of looking at it. It may not 15%, who knows whether that's the correct sort of figure, or was it 25%, sorry. No, sorry, they haven't mentioned the percentage. I was getting my percentages mixed up. But I think the exact percentage is not the issue. It's the principle that's important, that if tourists from outside are costing you infrastructure-wise, the easiest, the simplest way to get some resources to provide infrastructure is to collect it through there. You could put taxes on individual businesses, but that's a real can of worms, and one of them was mentioned actually on the television program I saw the other night. If you, in relation to the bed tax, you put a bed tax in Auckland, how do you tax the 40,000 odd people that might stay in Airbnb places that are all private in the city? So that's not something that would capture everyone, whereas you're much more likely with a portion of GST to capture across the board some element of that expenditure by tourists in the area.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I don't disagree with the intent of the remit, and I agree with Councillor Dave on this. I think in principle this is a good direction to go in, but I think it's a bit like a wet bus ticket, asking the government to give us back a portion. I mean, they're going to laugh at us and say, oh, we'll give you 1% or we'll give you 0.5% back. When you look at the statutory definition of rates, rates are a tax. Generally, taxes are not subject to GST in New Zealand. So following that definition, the state collect from this council, or will collect from this council, over $23 million next year from our rate collection of 152 million. So we rate 152 million, and then we ask the ratepayers to pay another 15% on top of that, which is $23 million. So on behalf of the government, we're collecting taxes of $152 million and then paying the government $23 million in GST. So I think the thrust of the remit should be saying, well, you know, you don't GST taxes. Why are you GSTing rates when in fact the whole lot should be coming back to us rather than just a small percentage? So I don't think the remit, the remit is correct in principle, and I can see the justification for it. But I think that this government are likely just to laugh at us and just say, yeah, we'll give you 0.5% or 0.25% back, and it'll only be nickels and dimes rather than really hitting back at something that should be consistent across the whole of the tax base.
Thank you, Councillor Rob. Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I think Councillor Rob Pascoe has summarised it quite well, and unfortunately in my own life I've been in 2 rooms. In this room I'm really keen to ensure that rates on, GST on rates and GST is returned to this patch. In another room I was on, listening to the Minister of Finance, there was a distinct lack of enthusiasm, and it is an interesting one because bear in mind that GST and tax does come back into this area in terms of expressways, funding hospitals and university campus developments, all of that stuff. I do, however, think that in this debate that the local government New Zealand should vigorously pursue enabling local government to have other things in the toolbox. And of course, we've had examples in Auckland of where the Auckland Council wants to, say, put a 1 cent levy on a petrol tax, can't even apparently do that. The room tax, and while it did have the so-called bed tax from Mayor Phil Goff, excellent mayor, I have to say I'm stunned at the hypocrisy of the poor me accommodation industry in Auckland. And we had the example of the Lions tour, and even Paula Bennett, the minister, had to intervene, the guy who had actually booked a room, and then suddenly the booking mysteriously went astray. And then the room was let out at X thousands of dollars or whatever, and to her great credit, the minister intervened. But I get very, very jaundiced in terms of some in the accommodation industry who can, at a drop of a hat, ruck up their market rates, when they have a major event like a Lions game in Auckland, and yet say, oh, poor me, that we should have a $10 room tax. And I think we do need to look at, even in the US jurisdictions that I've personally and others have experienced, we go to the US and, it's quite interesting, you get a hotel bill, then suddenly you see some local taxes there, and that recognises, that local tax recognises that we're putting a small tax on visitors to help fund the infrastructure. So I think that what I'd be asking, if you have any say or any discussion, Mayor Andrew, at the LGNZ, is to spread the message that this is fine as far as it goes. Personally, I don't think this is going to go far at all, but the real issue is enabling local government, within reason, to have other things in the toolbox, like an appropriate bed tax that would catch Airbnb as well, like petrol tax, all of that, to actually try and have more flexibility, and particularly with the pressures in some of the tourist areas where visitors are putting and will continue to put an increased pressure on the infrastructure. There's got to be a way in which those people can be got. And it may be, for example, even Councillor McPherson talked about how the government's ruled out some international visitor levy. Maybe that should be also pursued.
Thank you. I'll just comment. I'll be taking the message to the LGNZ conference, to whatever the will of this council is, and I'll be speaking for the will of this council. In this case, I believe that central government gets their income from tax, from PAYE, from business profit, from petrol tax and other ways. Local government gets their money from rates, targeted rates. We can put entry fees on things. And I believe that this is crossing the line between where local government gets their revenue from and central government gets their revenue from. I do believe that there are councils, I do know for sure, there are councils in this country which are really, really struggling with the visitor numbers. There are areas where there's 100,000 people coming through a day using the toilets, using the infrastructure, using the parking, and paying nothing into the economy. Because they happen to have a big tourist site in their city which is free entry. And this is putting extreme pressure on places like the glaciers, Fox Glacier, and areas like that, where there's just busloads of people coming through for a free event, and using the services and not paying, using the water, leaving wastewater there. So there is certainly an issue here that does need to be addressed, and central government does need to step up and do something about this. I just don't believe that this is the correct way to do it, but I think that it's very good it's come up because it's generated awareness and discussion around the subject, which has been going on now for a couple of years. Things like bed taxes, a charge on the airlines for any visitors, anyone coming in and out of the country, different ideas, but we're in an election year and nothing is going to be more certain than an extra tax being put on by a government at this stage, or an extra revenue on people. So we'll put this to the vote. Hang on, we can't have that choice. Can we reset?
Reset, yeah.
Gone backwards.
Shouldn't be.
One person at a time. That's Gary. It goes to Gary.
Okay, all those for, raise your hand, please. Okay, and those against?
The motion is carried, 1 against.
Thank you. So now we move to the LGNZ remit on page 85 and 86, remit number cats. That's where, yeah, that's where. Sorry, so we're now moving to the LGNZ remit number 3, national legislation to manage cats, and page 85 and 86. Okay, Councillor Jeff, this is for questions.
On page 87, it talks around suggested action and cat control officers and cat rangers. Presumably, is this going to mean staffing implications in terms of more resources?
Significant.
Yeah.
If you're going to go down that track, if you imagine, in essence, is talking about replicating something alike to the Dog Control Act, but for cats. Now we have 11,500 dogs in New Zealand, slightly different in terms of how you would, in Hamilton, and we have 6 dog control officers who are responsible for that. So that there would be some significant impact if we were to go down something of that magnitude.
Thank you.
Questions, Councillor Jeff?
Oh, I've
You
just
done?
been.
Okay. Councillor Siggy?
Thank you. Just following on from what Councillor Jeff just asked. So the cost of paying for dog registration, does it offset the cost for the dog rangers?
Correct.
It does. So it could
partial.
Partially. So how partially?
65%. 65%.
Okay. So we would be looking at something similar with cats.
Look,
maybe.
It depends on exactly what LGNZ or the government, in actual fact, comes up with in terms of what their model will be. But it should be structured towards some form of cost recovery. I mean, we would presumably have more cats in Hamilton than we have dogs.
Yeah.
Just to give you some number figures, and we have 11,500 dogs. If we're going to have a registration system where we're going to be able to worry about microchipping and registering and recording details of these cats, and then we are going to have some enforcement provision around that.
Okay, thank you.
But it should be on some version of a cost recovery model.
And just the other point to add is it's taken the team done a very good job getting the number of registered dogs in Hamilton up. The assumed position would be if you started this process, there would be a lead time before you'd actually have a significant number of cats registered.
So just welcome Sue. Calvin, could you just introduce Sue before you go on?
Sorry, if anyone that hasn't met, Sue Stanford, the Animal Control and Education Manager, sitting alongside them.
Thank you. Continue. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
There would be a step up. There would be a slow, but then a steady increase. I mean, we have some cats are already microchipped, so it's about recording the detail of the data. But yes, that would be an incremental increase.
Councillor Dave.
Does not the motion already talk about cost recovery element within that?
Correct.
So there's no question there'd be some element would be included from the start.
That's my expectation.
And when the government brought in the dog control legislation in about 2003 or something like that, there was quite an interim, operationally interim step, wasn't there, with us having a period within which, or the owners having a period within which they had to get their dog registered. It wasn't overnight, and there was a build-up of our resource matching that.
Okay. There's always been some form of dog registration prior to 2003. It's going right back to the Haidadits Act, so that's dog registrations in New Zealand have been around for decades. So the 2003 legislation was around tightening up rules around menacing dogs, and there's always built-in lead-in times for getting...
But there were no dogs microchipped before then, were there?
The microchipping came in 2006 as mandatory.
And there was a lead time to that, wasn't there?
I wasn't around at the time, but I believe so.
Yeah. So somewhat similar interim procedures were in place for dogs, as would have to be from what the CEO's talking about for cats. You couldn't do it overnight.
Certainly expect there would be. However, I've got no more data than you've got in front of you in terms of the remit.
Okay, Dave. Okay, so we're now going. We've got a mover. So we start with Councillor Mark.
Thank you. I fully support this. 4 weeks ago, I was sitting outside my house, and a lady turned up with a kitten in a box, and it looked pretty crook. It had worms, it had cat flu, it had what do you call that thing you get in your eyes? Conjunctivitis. Thank you. It was very, very unwell, and it had been dumped with his little brother. We're animal lovers in our house, and while I took that one to the vet to get it cleaned up and sorted out, my partner Karen went down and found the other one, little brother, and we now have 2 little cats at home. And it was awful. It was absolutely horrible to see how these cats have been treated. I think this actually, there's a lot of focus on controlling cats in this, but actually I support this because it is good for the cats. It is a lot better to have a well-managed animal at home, a well-managed, more domesticated animal, and I think this is the step we've now got to take. Cat ownership has gone through the roof, and they often say that controlling cats is about as easy as describing what the colour 9 smells like, but I think this is a really good step on the way. Cats will provide a different menace to us. You don't hear of a great many cat attacks on the street, as you do with dogs. I'd be quite interested to film it if it happens. But make no mistake, councillors, this will be expensive. I don't think it's going to be as expensive in staffing, but the microchipping will be. I was interested to see that Wellington hasn't lent its support to this, and yet Wellington, weren't they the ones that provided free microchipping for a while for cats down there?
They had
a bylaw about it, yeah. So I was surprised to see them not on the list of supporters of this, but I'm really pleased to get into some form of microchipping and cat management rather than cat control. So, yeah, look, I think this is fantastic. It's the next step. As our ageing population grows, so does the number of old ladies with cats, and so it's something we're going to have to deal with in the future.
Just old ladies?
I'm being stereotypical there, but, you know.
Crazy cat ladies.
Just
thank you.
Point of clarification is the list of supporting by doesn't mean that other councillors don't support it.
Right, yeah.
Like our name's not on there. It wasn't on there for the last vote, but we hadn't. This is our first chance we've had to discuss it. So.
Oh, cool.
All right. So that's just a list of people who are in behind it.
Right.
So that as
so
we're talking about it, we can consider who's in and who's out.
Okay.
Doesn't mean the others aren't in.
Sweet. Thank you. Cool. So that's all from me.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor James.
Yeah, I'm fully in support of this. Something has to be done to control cats. I'm not going to go on like Gareth Morgan and say how much trouble cats cause and how they kill large dogs by getting stuck in their throats. But look, New Zealand does have a problem. In 2011, Forest and Bird New Zealand did a bit of a study, and apparently known were 1.4 million domestic cats in New Zealand, and that's 1.8 cats per household, which Mark's actually got 2, so he's gone over the average. I don't know how you get 0.8 of a cat, but hey, that's fine.
When you have the dog in it.
Yeah. And then there are 220 cats per square kilometre in New Zealand. That's a hell of a lot of cats. So look, the damage these things do is quite phenomenal. They kill 1.12 million native birds in New Zealand a year, these things. And they kill at least 18.76 million animals each year in New Zealand. So that's all the lizards and everything else. They did a bit of a study in Dunedin a little while ago, and they put bells on cats there. And it halved the kills. The only things that killed were the deaf animals, I suppose. But look, those studies in 2011 didn't take into effect the feral cats in New Zealand, which are a large population of feral cats, and the study was done in 2011, so you can imagine what the cat numbers are now in New Zealand. So we're not the only country in the world that has these problems, because in USA, a study they did there, cats in the USA kill 3.7 million birds each year. Billion birds. So something has to be done about the cats in New Zealand, and I fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Dave.
Thanks. Look, I've heard it said that organising councillors is like herding cats, so maybe if we can get some legislation through, it'll make it easier for people like Leanne and Richard to get us organised. Yeah. It is sometimes treated like a joke, and I know when Gareth Morgan raised it, it was certainly initially treated like a joke, but when people started thinking about it, I think they started realising there was a very serious element to it, and James has touched on several of those elements, as has Mark. But, you know, our job as a council, whether we like it or not, is providing for community needs. And I think in several ways it's been demonstrated that this is a need in the community, and we have to decide whether it's a big enough priority need. But we've had submissions of the sort that Mark's talked about in support of more healthy animals, basically, in this case. We've also had submissions like the ones we had right at the start of the year, you might remember, coming to this council about the damage that cats were causing. And even though it was hard in that case to tell what was a feral cat and what was just someone's pet that was roaming outside the boundaries of the property, I think that with legislation like this properly organised, once it fully gets into swing, it'll enable us to identify more easily what's a pet and what's a feral cat, which will be one of the helpful things about that. At the moment, you daren't go around eradicating cats or using your 22 on them because you might actually hit someone's pet. And that is quite literally in some places a problem at the moment, being able to tell the difference. I think this is part of the answer. It will be a hassle for staff, I'm quite sure, but the dog control legislation when it came in was a hassle for staff. We suddenly had to start doing a whole lot of new things that we previously didn't do under the old hydatid control legislation, where there was voluntary sort of registration almost in some cases, or it amounted to that in practice. This would be much more like the current dog legislation and involve microchipping and be more electronically focused than we were able to do 14 years ago with the 2003 dog legislation. So I think it's a good start. It's going to take a while before this comes in, but let's support it getting started. We were told at the start of the year by Kelvin, quite rightly, that there wasn't the legislation in place to enable us to do something worthwhile and effective. This may give us the chance, if it comes in, to start working on that.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. Councillor Paula.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this going through. It's just a very complex issue because some people are talking about it from a nuisance point of view, of an animal welfare point of view, and all of those things are important. And this was driven around initially out of a conservation point of view around wildlife and native species in particular. And I just want to make the point that if this goes ahead, and it can be a costly exercise because cats breed so often and have large litters, and so it goes on. So this is about capturing the cats before they become breeding animals and educating people about cat ownership. At the end of the day, mustelids kill more wildlife than cats do, though cats are part of the predator system. So if we think that dealing with cats will be the panacea to the wildlife areas of our city and surrounding it, that's not true. We have to look at pest management in a holistic way. And from Hamilton's perspective, we know that we get complaints from time to time about possums. They do a lot of damage in people's gardens. We certainly get a number of rat complaints, because rats, where you've got a river, you're going to have rats. Where you've got a city, you can have rats. So ship rats, in particular, enjoying living down by a river. And of course, we have stoats and weasels running around the place. You just don't, if you're not out at night, you're probably not spotting them. So, yes, we should deal with this cat issue. I'm happy to support that, but I don't think it necessarily is the solution to the problem it pertains to be. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Paula. Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much, Mayor Andrew. Yes, I do agree with Councillor Paula. For me, I will agree with remit. I will support it. But what I can see is really that there will be a lot more responsible animal ownership. So once people have to pay for something and it's not free, they might just look after it better, and we'll make sure that they don't breed like crazy. So if they don't want to pay for another litter or anything like that. So yes, it will take probably a while to have that changeover, but yeah, I'm just looking forward to some more responsible animal ownership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Siggy. Councillor Leo.
Yeah, look, I can't support this. How far do we go with regulating everything? Next thing we're going to have the kids who have to register their pet rabbit or their pet mice or their canary or whatever the case may be, I think we've got to be realistic. Cats, of course, there are some feral cats, sure. And as Paula so rightly said, the cats actually control the mice and rats and all those sort of things. So once we start interfering with the ecosystem which we've got, I think we're really overreacting to this whole thing, so I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Leo. Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Just, unless anyone's going to speak, just want to reply. We introduced cats to our ecosystem, so I think we're just rebalancing it just a little bit. It is a little bit, strangely enough, like the anti-smacking laws, and the big criticism has been that they penalise good parents. And this is, it is the hardest actually on good, responsible cat owners. They're the ones who will be bearing the brunt of the cost of microchipping, etc. But we're a brave council. We've already put our toe into parking, so we might as well have a go at cats as well. I think we need to don our helmets when this one comes out, because this is going to be bigger than we know. But again, I'm supportive of it because it does put the responsibility back into the community, and anything that does that, I'm right behind. So.
Okay, so we're going to the board to vote.
I feel I'm good about this one.
Having some issues, vote with hand.
We're having technical issues, Councillor.
Okay, so all those for, please raise their hand.
Here you go, so I take that.
And those against.
The motion is carried, 2 against.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, so we're now going to the fourth remit for us to take the result to the Local Government New Zealand conference, and this is on page 88 and 89, and this is remit 4, development of a sugar sweetening beverages policy. So I will ask for questions first. Councillor James.
To develop a sugar-free drink haven within council facilities, what would that look like?
Have lots of lettuce leaves around it or something.
Like a haven? Like, are they proposing to not have sugar-free drinks at all, well, sugar drinks at all in council facilities? Is that what I'm looking at?
I'm sorry, it's only, you'll have to take it as it's read.
Oh, okay.
There's
And the, if I can help, councillor, the last paragraphs on page 29 suggest what that might look like. That's the only information that we have been provided with.
On what page?
Oh, sorry, page 90.
90.
Sorry. I was looking at the date instead of the page number. It wasn't helpful.
okay. James,
So this is not one that requires LGNZ to lobby the government for a change in government. It's effectively just a policy in respect of how council manages its own sites more than anything. And they're asking LGN to develop policies and guidelines to support councils in doing that. So I find this quite a weak remit in that respect and from what they're asking for, but
hang on, we're just finishing with James. That means only one sugar in your cup of tea, James.
I don't take any sugar in my tea at all. It's quite good for me.
You're already a haven.
Yeah. No. It's, the body's a temple, the temple of doom, actually. But I'll save it for discussion time. That's all right.
Thank you, Councillor Paula.
My question, I think you've just about answered it, Richard. My question was going to be, we don't actually need to either approve or disapprove of this because it's not actually requiring you to do anything that you couldn't do at an organisational level anyway, right?
Yeah, so the only advantage of, first we do need a supporter otherwise, actually the LGNZ conference, Mayor Andrew has the opportunity to abstain. So if you guys don't vote, Andrew can choose to abstain. But effectively it's just asking for LGNZ to provide a template should we decide to do it and also do some data gathering.
Well, I'll speak to that when it comes, but just to have a question on this council, we can, if we choose to not sell any sugary drinks or whatever, I'm not even sure if there's a vending machine in here, I haven't looked, haven't seen one, but that doesn't need this kind of approach, does it?
Well, hang on, this is questions.
That's a question, wasn't it? That doesn't need this kind of approach, question mark.
No.
Who are you asking?
I'm looking at Richard, because I'm saying, This
is not Richard's decision, this is...
I'm asking management, I'm clearly asking management whether we can do whatever we want to promote the exclusion of sugar and looking after our staff's well-being without this, can't we? That's what I'm saying.
So the other challenge I have for this is this, I believe, really sits, if it's relating to this bill, if it's relating to the staff, sits in the mandate of the Chief Executive rather than around Council as well. So it's more of a management policy than a council policy in that respect
That
also.
answers my question, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Rob?
My question is also directed at Richard. Would you see if this did become a sort of a policy that that this council might consider implementing? Does that mean that sugar disappears from the building completely, in terms of not just the Cokes and the Fantas and so forth, but also the little capsules of sugar that go into drinks? And second part of the question is, they're not quite clear in their notes as to whether artificial sweeteners actually constitute being sugary drinks either. So, if this became a policy, would you be implementing it in terms of removing all sugars from the building, including artificial sweeteners?
It's your decision.
Again, there's almost a degree of rhetorical to this, and I did mention before that this remit is weak, and I still stand by that, and it would be my decision. Anything I do with staff requires a heavy level of consultation, and whilst your elected officials can make a decision what affects on you, whilst your elected members can make a decision that directly impacts on you, and you have done previously in terms of the catering that's provided to elected officials and so forth, I need to consult widely with my staff in terms of this, and this would be a management decision. For elected officials' benefit, though, we do take the health and wellbeing of staff seriously, and we have had various initiatives to try and encourage people to eat healthy and so forth as well. So there are other ways of addressing this, and education is a big part of it, which is a practice we apply when we approach the community about things as well. Education is important.
So it would mean if you have sugar in your coffee, you'd have to go out and drink it on the street with the smokers. Sorry, moving on. Rob, have you finished?
Yeah, I finished, thank you.
Thank you.
I just think this is good.
Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. There's been a number of people have mentioned that people wouldn't be able to have sugar in this building, but isn't this actually talking about council facilities? So it would also extend, would it also extend to the zoo, Hamilton Gardens Cafe, Waterworld,
So, could I just
Veranda?
That's a really good question.
Can we just guide you to the last two paragraphs on page 90? It may bring some clarity to the remit.
I think Councillor Jeff is on the money. So from a customer point of view, this council has the authority to set the level of service and how we engage with the community. So council could make a decision even now that we do not provide sugar beverages or sugar related items or any specifics in terms of how we deliver our service to our community and our customers. So we could do that. When it comes to employees, that's my responsibility, and any change that I make in terms of the relationship with my employees, I'm effectively obligated under due process to consult with my employees in terms of what they do and they don't want, if I make a decision to go down that track. So that's a management policy, but anything you do with your community is a decision that this council can make. So you can make a decision that we investigate that all our cafes at our various sites, zoo, gardens and so forth, go down a certain track, and we'd have to look into that. But there's also bearing in mind contract ramifications that we have contracts existing with current providers as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Yeah, I just have a question. I haven't seen all the floors or all the council facilities everywhere. Do we have any vending machines anywhere?
I think we have 2 vending machines on the 3rd floor only, and that's the only place. I'm unsure about our off-sites. I can't recall seeing any vending machines, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're not there, Councillor Siggy. I just haven't noticed them. And I'm unsure exactly what, I'm more than welcome to show you the vending machines on the 3rd floor so you can see what's in them. I'm unsure, but we provide water coolers around the building and filters and so forth as a mechanism to ensure staff have access to water and healthy alternatives. We used to provide a staff cafeteria where staff could purchase their food. That was closed down about 3 or 4 years ago. And so most staff choose to either bring their own lunches in or go to the various cafes around the city for lunch as well. So we're very minimal, to be fair.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a significant impact, to be honest. And it's actually a choice. We don't actually force people to put sugar in their tea.
Are you sure?
But there is a sugar bowl there and some spoons if they decide to take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a mover? Okay.
In support or not supporting?
I support it, even though it's weak. But I still support it.
Okay,
And
so
I'll tell you
moved
why
by
in a
Councillor
minute.
Siggy, seconded by Councillor Paula.
No, it won't, sorry.
Sorry, seconded by Deputy Mayor Martin. Okay, so we'll start with Councillor Mark. Sorry,
Yeah,
it was
Siggy
moved
is-
by Siggy. Sorry,
Yeah,
Siggy,
Siggy, would
go
you like to go?
first.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment. We are seen as the leaders for our community, and I think we need to lead from the front, even though this is weak, and I would love to see something a little bit more robust about that. But I think we're already going down that track. Sounds like it, according to Richard. But I still think just as showing our constituents that we are thinking in general about the health of the staff here, plus out there, setting an example is always a good thing than not. So, I mean, I was shocked a few years ago when I saw vending machines in receptions of doctors' clinics and with Coke and all sorts of things, and that just goes against totally my grain. So we can do this here, keeping it as sugar-free as possible and as healthy as possible. I think we're on the right track, showing our constituents where we're heading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Siggy. Councillor Mark was next.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty relaxed. But okay, thank you, Mayor Andrew. I'm going to vote against it. I actually agree with Siggy. I would like us to take the lead in our community on a more healthy diet, because I believe that sugar is the new tobacco, and it is creating a hell of a lot of problems in our community, and I think there is a role for us to take it. But this particular wording of this, I actually agree with Richard. It's as weak as a wet tea bag, and it's also a little bit clumsy in that it's not clear the delineation between staff facilities and our community facilities. So if it was along the lines of Waterworld and our own facilities, vending machines and those, I'd be right behind it. But this is just, I think it actually presents more problems than it tries to solve, as it were, because it's going to get us into some pretty legal issues regards what Richard has to do with the staff. So I can't support it in its current form, but I'd sort of indicate that I would support a look at the issue down the track in our facilities and vending machines.
Councillor Jones, sorry.
Sorry, just quickly to note, most of our contracts with our vendors have a healthy option included in it as well, just FYI, so our various sites.
Yeah. But the question is, does it go far enough? Yeah, that's right.
Councillor James.
Yeah, Richard's right. This is a weak policy. It's probably as weak as an unsugared drink, actually. Look, Labor had Helen Clark in nanny state. Sorry, Martin. And I don't want to be part of a nanny council, really. You know, look, I'm all for free choice, and if a staff member walks in with a Red Bull, then all power to them. People should have choice as to what they have here. But to force it on staff members that there are no sugar drinks or anything else in the premises, then I think it's a little bit too far. And Siggy's for the policy, but I probably guarantee that can of drink she's got on her desk there has got sugar in it. No? Oh, I got that one wrong. So I'm against the policy. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I just don't think this gets us anywhere. It's actually, I think, a flag for the debate. This conversation has been had before. It is a good flag to raise. I mean, we mustn't forget that, I don't know, less than 2 decades ago, people were laughing when it was considered that smokers should not be smoking around other people. In fact, they should smoke outside or perhaps not smoke at all. So we do shift with our understanding of substances that cause the community harm, and there is a body of growing evidence around the overconsumption of sugar and as one of those factors. And I think it's really good that some people are taking local leadership. I think that's where it starts, not with vague policy, but with local action. That school in South Auckland, which the children only drink water, and how their teeth are improved, but they're also less. They're not. I'm going there, thanks, Councillor Pascoe. But also they've all significantly lost weight, those children. But, you know, that will lead people to adopt the change because it's seen to be successful. I would like to think that this council would do, within its own buildings and facilities, would pursue healthy options as best they can, be ahead of that trend. And if I can be assured that they're doing that, I don't think voting for this adds any value. But yes, we should be leading the way within our own. But we can't, I don't think it would be feasible, for example, to say no fizzy drinks at the pools, because, you know, you're just going to disenfranchise the public, and what you actually want to do is educate them through positive methods.
Thank you, Councillor Paula. Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I agree with Paula in so much as, well, more than that actually, that ultimately I think in 20 years we'll probably find the same thing with sugar drinks. We'll probably find that no one's drinking them. I hear a lot of this because my wife's a nurse, so I hear about it most nights. But I think this is a little bit clumsy and weak, and I think it probably at this stage could have repercussions for our facilities, like the great Hamilton Gardens Cafe, the zoo, museum, Waterworld, etc. It's a bit half-cocked, and I won't be supporting it. I'm probably channeling Gary Mallett a bit, but it feels a bit like a safety Nazi sort of thing to me. And I just not at this stage until if the Health Ministry or when the Health Ministry moves on it at some stage, I'd be fine with it, but not at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Jeff. Councillor Dave.
Thanks. I agree with what Paula and Jeff have said, except for their conclusion. what they've said actually says to me that this is a reason why you would support having a debate or a discussion further down the line on the policy. It is not actually, as most speakers have got confused about, not actually saying we should have a policy against sugar-sweetened drinks. It was saying we should have a policy that addresses that area and causes that discussion. Initially, I thought, nah, it's a waste of time. It's as weak as the dishwater that they call coffee in the councillors' lounge there, that sort of thing. But in actual fact, it simply puts it on the agenda for discussion around councils, and I think that's a good thing for exactly the sorts of reasons that Paula and Jeff have talked about. I think we are going to end up in that space. I think it's good for us to have that discussion. Should we be involved? Should the community do all the leading? Should the government do all the leading? Let's have that discussion. This is simply putting it on the agenda. Sure, it's clumsily worded. Most LGNZ resolutions are, in my opinion, but it's something that we should actually be looking at. What's our attitude towards that? And it could lead us to a policy. So I think people have got confused about the outcome that they think should happen in the short term and the process, which is all that this is talking about. It's only talking about us putting it on the agenda, or every council putting it on the agenda for a discussion sometime in the next year, I guess. And I don't see any harm in that in an issue that's becoming increasingly a community issue. So I would say you should vote for this at this stage. It isn't going to change much, because even if it goes down, we can still do that. Choose as a council to do that, but I think it would be probably on the margins better that all councillors in the country were addressing the issue one way or another than only some of them. So that's why I'm actually going to support it. Changed my mind initially, and thanks Siggy for raising the point she did. And I'll go back to my low-cal beer.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'm not going to support the motion. It does, as James suggests, have a little bit of a nanny state sort of influence that we are trying to tell people, not just our own staff, but people in our community, what they should and should not be drinking. I think Jeff raises a good point that not only is it within the staff, but also our facilities, but it probably also will extend to our contractors. So we'll have the likes of Montana Catering not being able to offer beers at functions that they cater for, and I don't think that that extension is really the way that we should be pointing the finger and telling them what to do. I think education is the best outcome, and the market also self-adjusts itself. And reading last week in a publication, I can't remember which one it was, that Coca-Cola are doing significant research now into finding ways that they can deliver their product with less sugar in it, and indeed with no sugar. So they're already seeing the effects of less sugar being consumed in terms of the sale of their own product. So the market will automatically adjust to reflect the changing patterns that people will get out of education. And so I don't think we should be setting the policy around this area. We should let the market do that with education.
Thank you, Councillor Rob. Councillor Leo.
Yeah, look, I can't support this. It's I'm getting a little bit tired of people telling me what I can eat and what I can't eat. And it's only a policy, sure, and you don't always have to comply with a policy. So it's got no teeth as far as I'm concerned, and this is an area, I think, which really is dealt with by the District Health Board, not us, that's for sure.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I love this term, nanny state. It was a construct, by my view, right-wing media and because the current government carried on the nanny state. There's no, you tell me, with the exception, and this is the important exception, with the exception of loosening up regs for school canteens where young people eat, the current government's done nothing to turn back. Even someone might have said nanny state was telling people to wear seatbelts, keep them safe. What is an objective? What is the motive of a nanny state? The only motive, I think, is to try and you live longer. Want to increase your lifespan. I don't think that's such a bad thing. What is the motive? What are we being asked to do here? That all councils should consider the development of sugar-sweetened beverages policy for their respective workplaces and facilities. What's wrong with that? Local government New Zealand provide, in return for our sub we pay them, local government New Zealand provide template policy and guidelines to assist councils with the development of such policies, and that they collect data for sugar sweetened beverages policy by councils at their AGM. I don't see any harm in that sort of data being collected at all. I do believe local government is in the space of social well-being, and that means we want our community to live longer. Now, obviously, from a District Health Board point of view, with my good colleague Dave and myself and others, it's not just our issue. I think it's a community issue. So, of course, we, as a community, are concerned with the stuff that comes out of our school canteens, and there's clear evidence that products and drinks with high sugar content are harmful to long-term human health. And there is a clear choice you guys are going to make when you're older, is that you're going to find when you want your hip operations and all of the things you expect from your health services, you're going to wait a whole lot longer, because we're going to be dealing with a bow wave of nutrition, poor nutrition-related health issues, and our hospitals are going to be clogged up as a result. I think this is a case where, in my view, that we should join with our public health team at the DHB. We should join even with the government in showing leadership in this issue, and at least actually to have the dialogue and have the conversation. We've developed a smoke-free policies as a council. We're encouraging smoke-free in children's playgrounds, garden places. Does it always work? No, of course it doesn't, but at least we're in that space. I think this is pretty, to be honest, I do agree. I think it's a little bit like a soppy, wet bus ticket. I think it's a very anemic resolution. I think it's totally anemic, actually, but it's better than nothing. So, you know, I'll be respectfully supporting it to go forward.
So if my memory serves me right, Deputy Mayor, the government you were referring to was going to tell us what type of light bulbs we were allowed to put in and weren't. And they were also going to tell us how much pressure we were allowed to have in our showers. And they actually voted through to put medication in our bread, which got removed before it actually came into, as soon as the new government rolled in. So I just thought I'd enjoy telling you those, reminding you of those things.
I can't recall that. Don't recall.
The additives to bread make memory go
So, and I also see smoking as a very different issue, because smoking does affect others. With this, we all remember people smoking in the restaurants over our food and our clothes. Every night we went out, we came home and we stunk. And even if we weren't smokers, I do believe that we do need to protect our children, because sometimes adults need to make the choices for children. But when I asked for a Coke, I asked for a classic Coke. I like the Sugar Rush. Thank you. Let's go to the vote.
Sorry, isn't there a right of reply?
There is.
Motion for a 12% increase in rates.
It was what was in the Coke, sir. Okay, right of reply.
Thank you. Well, you know, yes, smoking does affect other people. So does obesity. So does that affects our taxes. That affects our health system. Just like Councillor Gallagher said, that we might have to wait longer for our hip operations. It does affect a lot of things. I mean, you have a fat person falling on you. I think that would affect you too. Sorry, that was not very politically correct. But you know, we're all, yes, we have we make decisions every day what we put into our mouths, and yes, nobody can tell us what we can do and what we can't do. And I don't think this is about whether you want to bring a V or whatever into this building or not. This is just about us having a discussion on this subject. And I don't want to wait another 20 years and then somebody said, oh, you should have talked about this 20 years ago. You know, I mean, why aren't we just talking about it now, starting the discussion now on it? Yes, I believe this is weak as well, but just like I agree with Councillor McPherson that somewhere along the line we have to make that decision and start this discussion. It doesn't mean that the cafes or at Waterworld that we have to straight away change lots of things, but it's about education and putting healthy options in there and discussing it with and showing people that we're leading the way. I know that there's some cafes that do provide very healthy food and very healthy drinks in Auckland are more liked nowadays than the other cafes. So, you know, people are looking for healthier options and they're looking for leadership. And that's all I want to just provide is just some leadership that we say we're looking after ourselves first, and we're just saying no to sugary drinks in the future. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the board.
The motion is lost. 6 against, 4.
Okay, so now moving to item 10. Welcome, Brendan, on page 91. Yes, at 11:30, straight after this.
Good morning, councillors. Just as a recap, this submission is in relation to proposals that the Remuneration Authority are looking to put in place immediately. The longer-term proposals around the framework of remuneration for elected members will be considered in a later submission this year. You'll recall that feedback was sought from elected members a month or so ago, and thanks to those members who provided their comments. We are proposing a change to the submission that was sent to the authority, and this is covered in paragraph 6 of the report and highlighted in attachment 1. In short, it's really just a change in emphasis. So we're asking the Remuneration Authority to reconsider the timing of when they release their determinations so that councils can take this into account when they set their budgets, rather than councils having to adjust their budgets and timeframes to suit the determination coming out. So that's the only change that's been made there. So Leanne and I are open to answer any questions that you may have.
Councillor Dove.
It's not a question, but I would like to just give us a really brief report, because this item spawned a discussion at the team meeting, or whatever we called it, we had upstairs, and the delegates going to the next Zone 2 meeting of LGNZ were asked to raise the issue of some further points which would go in the latest submission potentially with other councils in the area. So we did that a couple of weeks ago, and there was quite strong support for our the issues that councillors around our table upstairs were raising to do with the tax status that councillors had. Are you contractors? Are you employees? The issue of KiwiSaver, ACC, expenses and how they were treated. Not the actual salary level, but all those conditions that go with the income that we get as councillors, and also the period of pay that after the election, if you're not re-elected or don't stand again, how that was different from central government elected members by a long way. You know, it cuts off clean for the day the election sort of is declared, rather than the pay. You don't get holiday pay, all sorts of things, sick pay, anything like that. So it was widely agreed by the other councillors that this council, and I've spoken with Brendan about this, should prepare some information and supply the legal report that we'd had to them with a view to encouraging not just ourselves but other Zone 2 councils and maybe LGNZ as a whole to put in a stronger submission to the Remuneration Authority in November. So that's just sort of an update, nothing supporting this, but what we might do next.
Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, can I just add to Dave's comments, because I'm not sure whether he covered this one off, but one that sort of irks me a bit as a contractor is the deductibility of election expenses.
We did raise that.
It did come up in the discussion, yeah. So I just wonder if, in case that's been missed in Dave's commentary, that should be added into. And I know that requires a change in the Income Tax Act, because specifically in that act they exclude a deduction for election expenses.
Okay, moved by councillor Dave, seconded by councillor Pascoe. All those, we'll go to the hands on this one. All those for? Any against? Carried unanimously. Okay, we go to page 131. Can we wait till 11:30? We may get through this yet and get to public excluded. So page 131, Leanne.
I'll talk to that one. So basically, going back 2 or 3 Community and Services Committee, it was raised by a number of councillors that there was concern that we'd separated out the 10-year plan financial reporting measures, which are the KPIs and the annual plan, about how we do them from the finances. So there's a struggle to see how we can monitor the organisation's performance by looking at the finances in one committee, which is the Finance Committee, and the non-financial performance in the Community and Services Committee. There was a disconnect, so you couldn't make that full consideration. Hey, we want to do X, and it's going to cost Y. The do X was in one committee, and how much it was going to cost was in another committee. So it was discussed at the chairs meeting that I bring a report forward to seek to have all that discussion in the Finance Committee, and any consequential outcome from that will go to the relevant committee that it relates to. So if we're talking about levels of service on roads, and the conversation saying, hey, why are the level of services on roads reducing, yet it's costing us more on our roads, that would go to the Growth and Infrastructure Committee. If it was a conversation about parks and gardens and saying, hey, we're spending a lot more on our plantings down the middle of Victoria Street, but it's looking like crap, that would go to the Community and Services Committee. So it's about having the monitoring function in the Finance Committee, but the response in the relevant operational committee that are related to. So that's what this change in terms of references to achieve.
Do we have a mover? Moved by councillor Paula, seconded by councillor Mark. Okay, we'll go straight to the vote. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there, Dave.
I expressed some reservations at the Chair's meeting about this, and feel them probably a little bit more strongly in having thought about it now, because it was sort of sprung on us there, I felt. I am concerned that the first place discussions about levels of service may end up happening, not by design but by accident almost, is in the Finance Committee. I don't think that is probably the appropriate first place for a discussion about levels of service, and we may well end up, when we're talking about you know, tree planting in the middle of Victoria Street and whether it looks like crap or not, we may well end up discussing that in the Finance Committee. So for me, that will mean that the bean counter's view of the world will sort of have preeminence, and the service provision part of the world will come later when it gets referred to the, in that case, the Community and Services Committee. I think the proper course of order of action or response really should be, what is the level of service that A, we think the community wants / needs, and B, how does it compare with other priorities? And then we pass that on to the bean counters to work out whether there's the money to afford that or not, which is essentially how it happened. But to turn that on its head, I'm not comfortable with that order of doing things. That's my personal view. But the bean counters may want to reply.
I was going to say, well, you're rephrasing that as a question. Hey, so I hear what Dave's saying, and in fact, I absolutely agree with Dave in terms of we should always start with a conversation about levels of service. In fact, that's what the 10-year plan's all about. We do seem to get stuck into the finances quite often, but we should see our level of service first, then work out what that costs, and then adjust accordingly. So I agree with Dave. I don't think this precludes that conversation from happening. The Finance Committee is a committee of the whole. It happens to be chaired by I'll call him a retired accountant because he stopped paying his dues.
Retired bean counter.
Retired bean, he stopped paying his dues. But it doesn't preclude that conversation, because ultimately I think primarily level of service is the main focus of the council, and the finance aspects is just basically what it's going to cost. So I hear you, Dave. I have the same concerns in terms of the order of events. I don't necessarily think that this will preclude that from happening anyway. But the other aspect is that you always have the opportunity, if you've got a particular level of service concern, you can approach your relevant chair to actually put it on the agenda as well. So there are other ways of getting it as a primary conversation as well, Councillor McPherson, which I think works and has proven to work, particularly through the chair's reports and the various committees, as a way of getting those conversations on the table, regardless of what happens in the Finance Committee.
So we are in debate, but Dave, I'll let you continue.
Oh, no, that
If
was...
Is there anything you want to add? It's just that it's unusual that we'd have the CE coming in.
Oh, I thought the CEO was supporting my speech, more or less.
More or less I was, but I still think we can achieve it through the Finance Committee.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit dubious about that, how it'll play out in practice.
Do you want to show your hand? Are you speaking for or against, or do you just want to leave that?
No, I'll keep you guessing for a bit.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Obviously, I think hear the CE's advice. I do stress that in terms of governance, you know, we have the sort of the three major committees of the whole, and I do see that finance is a very has a clear, obviously, financial reporting focus. Of course, that is its role. It has a detachment. It has a certain focus. But I do see the other two major committees of the whole having a very strong ongoing oversight of the operational details of council. And I think so. I'm just trying to work out that level of service, you know, argument. So I just want to get, I guess, some reassurance in terms of the agenda structure and agenda setting that we do adequately use the other committees of the whole. I know we're all the same people, and it's just a different chair there, but I think, you know, the kind of focus and the oversight is different. Well, it's just, I'm just expressing, it's not a question, it's just expressing a reservation. I'm wanting some interaction in the sense, I think it's quite legit in this area, it's committee. It's just, there, you can hear some concerns, and I'm happy for you to just reassure me, really, keep reassuring me that we will not. The Finance Committee has a clear finance focus. That is understood. I get that. That's the dollars and cents stuff. But it's very clear that I want leadership and good work done around the broader levels of service and stuff. And I don't think that just sits obviously in the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Robb.
Yeah, I spoke earlier this morning about how easy it is to spend ratepayers' money. And I fear that if we silo bin each committee, and we have levels of service being determined by other committees, and then finally coming back to finance and telling finance that they should fund it, then we will quickly end up with a council which is funding things that they cannot afford to fund. So I think ideally we should be working together. We should be holding hands perhaps, and moving forward so that when there are levels of service that need to be debated and agreed upon, there is ultimately some reflection back to finance to ensure that it is a matter of it being afforded. And it's more than just relying on bean counters here, because at the end of the day there must be some comfort for all councillors if you've got competent people, both in terms of around the council table and amongst our staff, who can make sure that financially we stay on the straight and narrow.
Councillor Paula.
To remove myself as the mover of that, I'm somewhat persuaded by some of the arguments. I think it might need a little bit of refinement and work. I'm just feeling a little bit less comfortable, so I remove myself as the mover. Thanks.
Could we just ask the Democracy Manager for advice? It's not that easy.
Isn't it?
Effectively, we need to withdraw the motion, I think.
Well,
Paula, in this instance.
What's your view?
It doesn't matter what your view is, it's the advice of the Democracy Manager.
Both Councillor Bunting and myself don't want to be the movers and seconders, so just give us the mechanism for that to occur, please.
So elected members,
and speaking to it, just speaking to it, the reason is it's not...
Hang on, whoa.
No. So
you don't want to know why?
No.
Okay, cool.
So the mechanism available to you is to withdraw your motion because it's been put to the floor and we're in debate. We just need the 75% agreement of members to withdraw it. Otherwise, the motion stands.
And then I have to vote against my own motion.
Someone else puts up another motion.
So hang on, can we have no comment? We are in the middle of debate.
Okay, so 75% people who are prepared
So
to...
could we call for a vote to see if the 75% who wish to withdraw this raise your hand if you, hang on, do we need a seconder for that?
No.
Okay, so do we have a
75% of you
so
happy for us to
Councillor
remove?
Paula and Councillor Mark would like to withdraw their support for this motion. So we need a 75% show of hands.
Just allowing them to withdraw the motion.
Now I've got to work out 75% now, don't I?
The only choice is to vote it down.
Against 10 here, so there needs to be.
Okay, so we continue with debates. We're now moving to Mark.
Well, have you finished your debate?
Yeah, oh, yes, I'll have to speak to it now if we're in debate. Thanks. Go first, sorry. Look, I understood the intent of it when we had this put up to us. I shared some of the same concerns when we had the discussion in the Chair's meeting, Councillor McPherson. Having looked again at the wording and heard the conversation that councillors feel that levels of service need to be a discussion that sit under the right body of work, if you like, derived from the right committee. I'm just not sure we've landed the words right to give people comfort, so I think it should be taken back and given a little bit more of a look at, and then I might be able to support the intent, but I think it's a bit confused.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. What changed my mind on this was two things. One, Dave's concerns, but two, something that Rob said about us operating in silos. And the difference is, Mayor Andrew, you've set this up, this council up as committees of the whole. So it's not as if we suddenly don our overalls and hard hats and sit in our growth infrastructure and we suddenly wear gingham shirts when it comes to the committee or when we go into finance we suddenly put on grey colourless suits and become, frugal. No, exactly. But I mean, I think we've got enough strength to debate each issue on the same vein as we go on. So I'm quite comfortable in withdrawing this in that respect because we don't suddenly become fiscally irresponsible when we're in those different committees. So I'm quite comfortable to keep it as it is. He says with this very thin grasp of knowledge of what's going on at the moment.
Does anyone have a problem, and if you do, if anyone has a problem, we won't ask for it, but with the Chief Executive explaining why he put this up? If anyone's got a problem with that, one person's got a problem, he can't speak.
Depends what he's going to say.
So has anyone got an issue with Richard?
I have explained already, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we go.
This is around, with respect, Mr Chair, this is around good governance. I'd like to ask our Chief Executive, the only person we employ, perhaps just to, you've reflected on some of the concerns that have been raised, and through the Chair, I'd like you to comment on that.
So this is not about the decision making, this is about monitoring, and the question is whether or not you can monitor the non-financial performance of the organisation in one committee and the financial performance of the organisation in another committee and not draw the connection between the two. So it's just about the monitoring, it's not about decision making. So that's the challenge. So that's all I'm talking to.
Thank you.
Okay, so we go to the board. Okay, so
Can we have a look? I want the display. I want to see who voted for what.
well, I'll use my casting vote.
Yep.
For. Did you hear that? Hang on, no speaking until the vote's finished, please.
Stop voting the opposition side.
So the vote is a tie, so yeah.
Point of order. I mean, just I'm raising the point of order, but before the Chair puts a casting vote, I'm raising the point of order.
Hang on, stop, Deputy Mayor. No one's allowed to speak until the voting's finished. Is that correct?
Mayor Andrew's correct. There was a delay in the feed coming up, so your point is. Otherwise, you need to do it by hand.
Okay, so I have already announced that I will use my casting vote
In favour.
in favour.
Okay, further to that, could I raise a point?
Only if it's a point of order, or point of process. Okay.
Point of process
Yep.
here on in, that I think on a matter of process that's happening in council, it would be unwise to, I'm suggesting this to yourself and the Chief Executive, it would be unwise to proceed this course of action without further discussion with council about this point of active briefing session or something like that. We haven't had a roundtable discussion. There's clearly a division amongst the remaining councillors. There's 3 councillors away, and I don't think I know it wasn't the intention, but to end up ramming it through on a casting vote is not a good way for process forward for this group in terms of acting collegially.
What I'll do is I'll bring to a briefing how this is going to work, what it's looked like, and then we can discuss whether or not it's achieving the outcomes we try to pass through today as well. So.
I think that would be wise, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I can do that. Yeah, that's fine. I'll make note of that and pass it on to my governance manager to make that happen.
And we can work on Councillor Gallagher in the meantime.
Okay, so we've got one more paper. So, okay, we'll paper 14. Leanne, if you could speak to this, please.
Councillors, this is just an, if you like, an administrative matter to update the terms of reference for the Hamilton Public Transport Joint Committee. It's minor change. Councillor McPherson may choose to comment. On page 141, can I just draw your attention to the fact that we have advised Waikato Regional Council to ask them to update their terms of reference. You'll see at the top there in the reporting to box, it
So
says
just a correction there, we're on.
Hamilton City Council Strategy and Policy Committee.
Hang on, Leanne, I
Sorry,
announced this
apologise.
as paper 14. It's not paper 14, sorry.
Oh, I'm with you.
For the record,
Sorry.
it's paper.
For the record, we're on paper item 12.
12.
Yes. So that should be Growth and Infrastructure, not Strategy and Policy Committee. Having said that, the text in red is the change that you are being asked to approve today.
Comment.
Oh,
We
hang on.
felt.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. But
Yeah.
is that okay?
Yeah,
Yep.
because he's on the
So
committee.
we felt that that's Leo and I guess, as the delegates to that committee, felt that it was important to include Waipa and Waikato in discussions about bus services. Quite a number now of bus services originate in their patch and end up in our patch. And it's important that the whole region's bus services are working together. That's increasingly happening, that area, and even though still 90% of the region's public bus services are totally within Hamilton, it's still important that we include the others in those sorts of discussions. So it was sort of a no-brainer to us, I think.
Councillor Paula?
I think it is a no-brainer. Just a question though. Just wanted to make sure that the thinking that you have around this and my thinking is aligned. So with speaking rights and voting rights on satellite service matters only, I'm presuming that recognises that they might have a say on interconnected services where any matter may affect their satellite service. I know you don't want those outlying regions telling Hamilton how to run its internal bus services, but where so far as an interchange or a change to an internal bus service might have effect on their satellite services, they'd be able to comment?
Oh yeah, there's nothing stopping them commenting, and truth be known, they're pretty much, the decisions are consensus, and we're only recommendations to the Waikato Regional Council itself anyway. We don't have decision-making power in that sense, so we haven't had a vote, an actual vote this year, have we, Leo? No.
No. Well, no, I know it works very well generally. It's very collegial, but just so far as they fund 50% of any service and we fund 50% of any service, anything that materially affects that, they should be able to demonstrate rights across.
Yeah, it's particularly those satellite services that we wanted them on board for.
Are you
Thank you.
moving, Dave?
Yep, I'll move.
Seconded by Paula.
Leo.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Leo. Yep, Leo. Yep, that's appropriate. Okay. We have no one to speak, so we'll go to the vote. Those for, any against? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 13, David Bryant. David. Okay, do we have a mover for this one? Moved by James, seconded by Councillor Robb. Any questions? Any discussion? Go to the vote. All those for? Any against? Carried unanimously. Item 14. Do we have a mover? Moved by James, seconder. Seconded by Mark. Any questions? Any debate? All those for? Any against? Carried. Now a resolution to exclude the public to go into confidential. We have a mover in Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor James. All those for? Any against? Carried. Thank you. We'll stop until 12 o'clock for a cup of tea. Thanks for your patience.